FBI's national security and intelligence branches were both forced out at the beginning of the year. Who replaced them in those positions?
Excellent qualified personnel to lead the mission of arresting 23,000 violent criminals this year alone. That's twice as many as before.
Who took the places of
I'm not going to give you any names so you can attack them.
Why not?
So you can attack them. I'm not doing that. The
You're not
people
gonna
sitting
give
in
me the
those seats
names
are
of-
extremely qualified to handle the job. We
You're not
would
gonna
not
give
have
me
the
the names
results.
of personnel who
We would
should
not
be
have the
on your-
reduction
Right,
of
fine,
violence in the
moving
state
on.
of Hawaii if we did not allocate the
Earlier
resources we
this
did.
year, FBI counterterrorist special agents and investigators were reassigned to assist with immigration enforcement. Reportedly, these counterterrorism experts were returned to the jobs they trained for in late January after Iran threatened to retaliate for our strikes on their nuclear facilities. Have those experts remained in the jobs they trained for since that time? Yes or no?
FBI agents' primary responsibility is exactly what they are assigned to do. We always work with our
So since they
interagency
returned
part.
to their positions,
If you're not
are
going to
they
let
still
me
in
answer,
those
why don't you
positions?
just do your soliloquy in the 4.5 minutes you have
I
left?
am not asking for a soliloquy. It's just a yes or no. Are those people who were returned to their jobs still on those jobs? Yes or no?
They never left.
What was that?
They never left their primary job. It is a surge of resources in law enforcement working with the interagency to combat violent crime and reduce
They were
violent
never-
crime in
okay, they were never
historic
reassigned to do
proportions.
That's your testimony. Okay, Director Patel, the FBI is also the lead federal agency for investigating cyber attacks and
Yes.
cyber intrusions, both by foreign nation states and by non-state hacker groups. Since President Trump's inauguration, the executive assistant director in charge of the criminal and cyber branch and the head of the FBI cyber division have both left the FBI. What are the names of the people who replace them in those positions?
The cyber branch is one of the most impressive at the FBI. 409 arrests this year, 169 convictions. That's a 42% increase from the same time last year.
It's that
So
branch,
any
Mr.
suggestion that
Patel.
the FBI cyber division is not operating at full capacity and better than ever before, the leadership at the branch is implementing these changes necessary to attack the cyber and ransomware infrastructure operators
You
for
know
Iran,
why
China,
they're
and Russia.
important? I want to know who has those positions, since the people who originally were there,
Supremely
are no longer
qualified
there.
individuals have those positions.
are they?
Supremely qualified
Who
individuals.
are they? What are the names?
You're not
You
getting
don't
them.
know. Special agents who investigate cybercrime were also reassigned for immigration enforcement. Have those expert investigators returned to their duties? Yes or no?
All agents remained on their primary duties while surging to allocate resources for interagency operations to the Homeland Security task forces across this country.
So are you,
Am I what?
see, I'm not getting the yes or no answers. I get all this explanation. So there you go.
No, you get the work that
Are
the men
you
and women of the
planning
FBI are doing. And you don't want that.
Additional personnel cuts to the cyber division in the future?
The only people that will be terminated at the FBI will be those that violate their oath of office or fail to meet the high standards at the FBI.
Director Patel, the FBI is meant to be the tip of the spear in combating terrorism against the United States from both foreign and domestic sources. It's also our lead agency in fighting the hackers who target our businesses and critical infrastructure. But instead of a specialized role fighting these kinds of terrorists, hackers, and spies, you have the FBI playing the role of local police and helping with immigration enforcement. I'm going to move on to my, you've been asked some questions about changes to your hiring standard, and including college degrees and possibly the age. But, one question I had is, that you are now requiring applicants to be able to do a certain kind of pull-ups, which a lot of women cannot because of physiological differences. Are you requiring these kinds of pull-ups?
We are requiring a physical program at BFTC at Quantico because FBI agents carrying guns in the field have to chase down bad guys and do really hard work. The physical fitness standards of those agents
So
are
are
being
you requiring
appropriately
these
assessed.
kinds of pull-ups?
We are requiring everybody to pass the 1811 standards at BFTC. If you want to chase down a bad guy
Excuse me,
and put
the
him in
reason I
handcuffs, you
ask-
better be able to do a pull-up.
The reason I ask is that there are concerns about whether or not being able to do these kinds of harsh pull-ups is really required of FBI agents.
Doing one
Anyway,
pull-up
Mr.
is not
Patel,
harsh,
I
and there are
am
always
gravely
medical
concerned.
exemptions to that.
I am gravely concerned by the state of the FBI under your control. And in fact, you are willing to take a cut on your agency of almost $500 million. So the FBI is losing dedicated employees, decades of expertise and specialization, leading to loss to early retirements, firings, and reassignments to immigration enforcement or conducting local police work. Thousands have already left. For as long as you remain as the head of the FBI, I fear the number of departures and summary firings will continue to grow. Mr. Patel, before the vote on your nomination of this committee, I noted that your most significant qualification, this is not just something that I noted, but others, your most significant
Actually gets this place going.
qualification was your 100% loyalty to President Trump. And I fear that that continues to be the motivating factor in your position as FBI Director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor, Mr. Chairman.
Director Patel, did you
Yes.
have anything you wanted to say now?
That is an entire falsehood. You can delete my 16 years of government service to multiple administrations all you want. The fact is that I was a public defender. I was a national security prosecutor. I was a House intelligence staffer. I was a deputy director of intelligence. I was a chief of staff to the Department of Defense and the Secretary of Defense. I led the counterterrorism missions for the White House. Those are just some of the jobs I held in my 16-year career. There was no loyalty then. There's no loyalty now to anything but the Constitution.
Senator Brett.
Yes, well, before I begin, I want to thank Senator Hirono for what she said, acknowledging that there are physical differences between men and women. Talking about that women wouldn't be able to do as many pull-ups, and I think that she was making a case here that there should be different standards. There's a thing called Title IX, and this is why we continue to say we should have biological men and men's sports and biological women and women's sports. And so I look forward to utilizing that to talk to all of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Maybe they will stand with us in helping us protect women's sports. I think she made a great argument there for it. Moving on to today, Director Patel, thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to making sure that America is safe again. Thank you for doing that coast to coast and within our cities. I certainly look forward to talking about that and talking about your historic gains in these areas. But I would be remiss if I didn't begin my questioning with you about the horrific events that we have seen over the last week. Obviously, our heart breaks. Not only for Erica and Charlie's two children and for parents and families, but for America and for those of us who knew him, you being chief among those. So just my sincere condolences and thank you for the steps that you and the FBI have taken to make sure that we have someone within custody and we're going to be able to move forward with that. But if you look over the last, since last summer alone, we had 2 assassination attempts on the president. We've had an arson attack on the governor Shapiro there in Pennsylvania. You have the murder of the state representatives, Melissa Hortman and her husband in Minnesota, along with the shooting of State Senator John Hoffman and his wife. Several anti-Semitic attacks, several attacks on Christians that were noted by Senator Hawley. We had the killing of 2 Israeli embassy staffers here in D.C., the June firebombing in Colorado. We could go on, and we saw a culmination, as Senator Schmidt said, with the brutal assassination of Charlie Kirk last week. I appreciate you committing to both Senator Hawley and Senator Kennedy, talking about making sure that all that are involved are held accountable. I think that is critically important, and I think that America needs that transparency. I want to read you some words of Vice President J.D. Vance. He said, "If we want to stop political violence like what happened to Charlie Kirk, we have to be honest about the people who are celebrating it and the people who are financing it. My question to you is, in light of Charlie's murder and all of the things that we have just referenced and have been talking about today, what steps is the FBI taking to more aggressively crack down on those who promote, encourage, finance, fund these types of engagements and this type of political violence?
Thank you, Senator, for your kind words. So in terms of how we crack down on the root cause of this violence, for now putting aside the ideological motivations and how they got there, the monetary issue is a real issue. And as I've said before, we follow the money. So we work with our partners at the Treasury Department to trace where the money came from, how these individuals paid for the training they received or the platforms they were using, and also how these individuals collectively got together in whatever groups they were on whatever social media sites they were on, to utilize clickbait to make money
Bingo.
For their ideology. And so to trace all of those, we are using, not just in Charlie's investigation, but others, lawful process and serving 2703D orders on any entity that is related in any way financially to any of these criminal acts of violence. And we are going to hold them accountable with our partners at the Department of Justice.
Excellent. I would love to stay abreast of that, and just, we must get to the bottom of it. We must follow the money. Someone is funding this discourse. Do you believe, obviously there are people here, unfortunately American citizens, that may be engaged in that, but do you also believe that some of this may be coming from overseas?
Yes.
Okay, let's get to the bottom of it, and let's make it stop.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to ask you about the Dobbs decision. So we know that it was leaked in May of 22, and then we had the Marshal Service say we found nothing in January of 23. I find that absolutely mind-boggling, that we can't figure out who leaked that opinion. We know it was done in attempts to undermine the process, and then the intimidation of the justices occurred after that. Tell me what you can do as FBI director to help us get to the bottom of what happened and actually hold someone accountable for their actions.
So I can't speak to what the marshals did and how they conducted their investigation. I can tell you, generally speaking, the FBI has taken over the investigation on the leak because it was such a detrimental leak.
So you commit to getting to the bottom of it.
We are utilizing the full resource of the FBI as we usually do on leak investigations, and we will make sure our results are public at the appropriate time.
We need answers. I want to talk about child sexual exploitation. Thank you for making protecting our youth your top priority. We know that that is the greatest gift that we have. That is our greatest treasure here in the United States, is the next generation. And finally, we have an FBI director that is putting that at the top of his list. Can you tell me the steps and the different initiatives? I've heard you talk about a couple of them. You've mentioned 764 amongst other things. Tell me what you're doing, and specifically, I want to know about when it comes to sextortion. So as a parent who is raising children right now, teenagers, and you're looking at what's happening, whether people are snapping photos and then what's happening online. I have had a number of parents sit in front of me telling me terrible, heartbreaking stories about their children ultimately taking their own life because of being blackmailed. I want to know, what steps are you taking to get to the bottom of that and to absolutely end this? If this were happening in a storefront, Mr. Director, that store would be shut down, no matter where it was, coast to coast, and yet we continue to allow these things to happen, and we've got to have a more targeted approach when we're looking at this. And so what are you doing to protect children, and specifically sextortion?
So in our VCAC initiative, our Violent Crimes Against Children is our umbrella enterprise operations hub for things like Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Not Forgotten and Operation Justice. And in things like that, those are producing the results that I told you about: 1,500 child predators arrested, 300 human traffickers arrested, 4,700 children identified and saved, a 35% increase from year to date last year alone. But specifically on your sextortion question, Senator, that is a problem that we are seeing explode on generative AI and private sector and social media companies. And what we're doing is engaging with NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploiting Children, because this one stat alone should probably cause great pause. They have seen a 1,325% increase in generative AI leading to sextortion and child sexual abuse. That cannot be countermanded by the FBI alone. We have embedded people at NCMEC and have a great partnership with them. But what we need to do is what we did in the month of May, and we're doing it over and over again. We arrested 400 individuals in 1 month in 1 month search.
Wow,
These
thank you.
individuals have prioritized, the agents and intel analysts have never left that mission. They're doing multiple missions at the same time. That's what the FBI is called upon to do day in and day out, and we won't stop doing two things at once. But we need help from social media companies. We need help from the private sector and the internet service providers that allow this generative AI to be hosted on their platforms. We have got to get a resolution on that with our partners in Congress and the private sector.
Well, we are definitely committed to working on that. I know the people up here. So you let us know what tools you need, and I know we've got several ideas that we look forward to pushing forward. In my remaining 2 minutes, I want to talk to you about your historic results when it comes to crime. In particular, we've seen here in DC just a total transformation. You mentioned earlier 60% down in gun crime, 70% down in carjackings. You said 50% down in homicides, to name a few. We have a success story, and we appreciate President Trump's leadership on all of this. We have a success story in Alabama where the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, so ALEA, they just marked their 1-year anniversary of the Metro Area Crime Suppression Unit. There in Montgomery, it is a coordinated effort with ALEA, with our Attorney General, with Montgomery PD, and our sheriff, Montgomery County sheriffs. They've seen a 30% drop in violent crime and a 19% drop in overall crime. So it is actually producing results. It's this type of interagency connectivity that I think ultimately is going to lead us to safer cities and safer streets. I know that you are committed to that, committed to working with your partners. You said earlier you've elevated sheriffs and police officers there to the 7th floor. Thank you for doing that. I am grateful for the men and women of Alabama in uniform that have made this happen, and want to know, how is the FBI working to collaborate in these types of ways across our country to make sure that we have even greater success stories to tell?
Well, the collaboration's happening at our Redstone Arsenal in Alabama. We bring 4,000 students through our Redstone Arsenal for training every year. In terms of our future plans, in the next few years, we will bring 13,000 students a year through Alabama's Redstone Arsenal. And by students, I mean FBI employees, I mean sheriffs, I mean police chiefs, I mean cops, I mean intel analysts, because that is their future gem of how we're going to train local law enforcement. And we're so thankful for the dedication of resources to that facility. And I encourage everyone to go down there and take a look, because if you want to see where the FBI is going and how we're going to train the future, it's happening at Quantico and Redstone.
We are very proud of it, and thank you so much for your leadership.
Senator Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, I want to start off where we left off last time. I asked you whether you had any knowledge or discussions about removing FBI officials and installing political personnel before you were confirmed to that position. And I wonder, did you then understand or have conversations with the White House about the intentions to do so?
Before I was confirmed,
Yes, sir.
did I have discussions with the White House to remove FBI personnel?
Yes.
No.
So you're saying that you had no discussions with the White House before you were in the position about the removal of any personnel from the agency?
As I was preparing for my confirmation hearing, I had numerous discussions involving the type of people that would be employed, and that those that were failing to meet the mark at the FBI would no longer be employed if I were
And
confirmed.
I'm assuming that mark had to do with loyalty to the Trump administration.
No, you're wrong.
Okay. I'd like to revisit another subject from that hearing. Did you testify, you did testify before the grand jury that President Trump had declassified the documents at issue in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. Is that correct?
I don't have the grand jury transcript. That's why I released it. Whatever it says is the best evidence.
You know, that's what you said to Senator Whitehouse, that your grand jury testimony was publicly released. It has not been. In fact, in July, a court denied a news outlet's bid to get that transcript. But the court said quite clearly that you are free to discuss your grand jury testimony. So I ask you again, did you testify before the grand jury that President Trump declassified the documents at issue in the Mar-a-Lago classified document case?
And that is why I took your invitation to work with the department and the court to have that transcript released. And the transcript is the best evidence of what I said then.
So you're saying right now this committee can have access to what you said before the grand jury?
To whatever was released. Under my understanding, Senator,
So
that the
hold
Department
on,
of
hold on.
Justice
You and I both
released.
understand the law. Let me finish. I understand under Rule 6 of the Federal Rules of Procedure, a grand jury witness, in this case you, is not barred from sharing their grand jury testimony. This is an oversight hearing. This is germane to your integrity and credibility. You know right now whether or not you testified that President Trump declassified the documents at issue in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. Why are you refusing to answer that simple yes or no question right now?
Because the premise of your question is inaccurate, and
The
that
premise,
is
there is
why.
no premise to my question, but trying to get to an order of what is truth or not.
How do you
did
know
you
what,
or
how,
did you,
how do you know what was asked in the grand jury if you weren't there?
Mr. Patel, this is a mockery you're making of this hearing and simple questions.
It's a
So let
simple
me move on.
question. If you have a
Mr. Patel,
transcript, you
during
can
your
read the question,
nomination
but you don't have
hearing,
it.
you promised that, quote, all FBI employees will be protected against political retribution. When I asked you, are you aware of any plans or discussions to punish in any way, including termination, FBI agents or personnel associated with the Trump administration, you explicitly said under oath that you were not aware of any plans to punish FBI agents associated with criminal investigations of Donald Trump. I don't believe you were truthful. Firing FBI employees based solely on the cases that they are investigating, their case assignments, is illegal, and you know that. A new lawsuit that's been discussed numerous times, filed by 3 FBI officials, alleges that you carried out Donald Trump's campaign of retribution, in quotes, against FBI employees for, quote, failure to demonstrate sufficient political loyalty. One of those plaintiffs has been discussed today, Brian Driscoll. Now, we know 20 years of distinguished service to the FBI before you terminated him. Special agent in charge of FBI's Newark field office, where he operated with distinction. Medal of Valor winner, Shield of Bravery awards. He's a patriot. You terminated Driscoll via a letter dated October 8th, 2025, and in that letter you said that you were firing him pursuant to Article 2 of the Constitution. Well, you're not the President of the United States, and so I'm wondering under what authority you were allowed to terminate him.
That matter is under litigation, and I'm not able to discuss it.
Okay, well, discuss this. Did you have discussions with Stephen Miller about firing this particular person or about his continuance in the FBI?
Not that I recall.
How often do you speak to Stephen Miller?
Frequently on our Homeland Security task forces.
You frequently talk with Stephen Miller about subjects other than Homeland Security Task Force issues, correct?
I frequently talk to Mr. Miller about Homeland Security task forces.
Has Stephen Miller ever given you his opinions on how to run your agency?
Mr. Miller's interagency operations are invaluable to the FBI. That's what we talk about.
So you frequently discuss your job and your responsibilities with Stephen Miller and Pam Bondi, I imagine, as well.
Absolutely. She's the Attorney General.
Understood. Okay. Donald Trump promised to make us all safer. You have pushed out senior FBI agents with decades of knowledge and experience. In fact, this is the first time in FBI history that neither the director nor the deputy director have any experience with the FBI. You've shifted the agency's priorities primarily to pursuing Donald Trump's immigration enforcement agenda. According to ICE data, the Cato Institute, which is a conservative think tank, found that 20% of all agents have been diverted from their work to assist ICE immigration enforcement. 20%. Part of this operation is the work of mass law enforcement who jump out of cars, snatch people off streets at churches, schools, and their jobs and hospitals. Have there been any FBI agents who investigate crimes against children that have been assigned to immigration enforcement, yes or no?
The premise of what you say is entirely
Have there been
false.
any FBI agents who investigate
no.
foreign domestic terrorism?
You don't get to say the America is not safer under this
I am
leadership.
not saying
America
that.
is
You're
safer
making
because of the work of the
presumption-
FBI.
You're making
are
a presumption
doing.
of premise.
4,700 children.
Sir,
We have
you
seized 6,000 weapons and
you are not
23,000 violent
denying
felons have
that
been
FBI
arrested.
agents who investigate human trafficking have been reassigned to immigration enforcement. You are not denying that FBI agents who are on the task force that Fight against Russian oligarchs have not been reassigned. Public Corrections Squad reassigned. People who defend us, defend children, reassigned. You're not denying that. I've seen you
FBI
time and
agents
time
don't
again
get reassigned.
attack my colleagues' premises of questions as a way to not answer the question. So let me end with this. I believe you have made our country weaker and less safe. I believe that we are more vulnerable to a major event, and I pray to God it doesn't happen. You've gutted the Bureau of Institutional Knowledge and Expertise. You fired or pushed out seasoned FBI officials, many with more than 20 years of experience, and were working on cases that were critical. You've been purging thousands of serious law enforcement officials who spent their careers keeping us safe, only to lower hiring standards in order to find anyone to replace them. And shockingly, you admitted in this hearing to Senator Coons that it would take 14 years to fill the vacancies at your agency. Many are the result of your purge. 20% of FBI agents are doing low-level immigration enforcement instead of their mission-critical work. You've disbanded entire task forces that stop election interference, foreign influence, public corruption. And who benefits from this? Well, corrupt people benefit from it. Criminals benefit from it. Vladimir Putin benefits from it. And it really makes me wonder who you're looking out for. It makes me think we can't trust you as a nation. You swear to release the Epstein files, but now you're withholding the Epstein files. You claim that you have a suspect in a serious assassination. Whoops, then you don't have a suspect. You know nothing about plans to remove FBI agents, yet you're directly involved in those plans. In the words of an ex-FBI official, you are overseeing, and I quote, generational destruction of the nation's premier law enforcement agency. Mr. Patel, in just 8 months, you have assaulted the institutional integrity of the FBI. But I know FBI field agents. I've worked with them in Newark. No matter how truly bad you are, you can't undermine the legacy of agents who fight every day to keep us safe, but you can tarnish the integrity of the agency and undermine the agency's capacity. I believe you're failing as a leader, and that your failure does have serious implications for the safety and security of Americans and our families. We're more vulnerable to domestic and foreign attack because of your failures of leadership. I don't think you're fit to hand the Bureau, but here's the thing, Mr. Patel. I think you're not going to be around long after the oversight hearing. Because as much as you supplicate yourself to the will of Donald Trump and not the Constitution of the United States of America, Donald Trump has shown us in his first term and in this term, he is not loyal to people like you. He will cut you loose. This may be the last time I have a hearing with you because I don't think you're long for your job. But I'm going to tell you this, I pray for you. I pray for you that you can step up and defend your oath, defend the Constitution, and do a much better job of defending this country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you want to say anything?
Yes,
at this
sir.
point?
That rant of false information does not bring this country together. If you want to work on bringing this country, it's my time, not yours.
My God.
If
You're
you
gonna
want to
lecture
talk
me
about
dividing this country,
it is my
I follow
time.
you on your social media posts that
It is
tear
my
this country
time
apart.
to
There
address
should be a
your
unifying-
falsehoods.
Oh,
You are an
you can try
embarrassment
all
to the
you
division
want
in this country.
to not
Senator,
take
it is
my
responsibility
time.
for what
You
you
had
have
your
said.
time.
Sir, you're
Your
making
time
a
is
mockery of this
over.
committee. Sir, you don't tell me my time is over.
You
The
know how
people
far
of New
we've
Jersey
come
tell me
since
what my
you
time
tell-
is.
Senator-
You can't lecture me.
You can tell me
Sir,
my time's over?
You may be the charge of the
I'm not
FBI,
going anywhere.
but I am not afraid of you, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Not afraid of you.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Senator Booker, I announced at the beginning of this meeting that this back and forth, talking over each other, doesn't work. And I said if that happened, I asked Patel not to respond, and I was going to give him some time after the senator's time was up to respond. And he has the privilege to do that uninterrupted.
Mr.
So
Chairman,
go-
one point of
Go
order.
ahead, Mr.
I've
Patel.
watched him talk over us, and you've never once criticized him for us not even being able to get our questions out.
Well,
He has been rude and disrespectful to senator after senator.
And when the senators were not giving him a chance to answer, I didn't stop the senator either. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the FBI, under my 7-month leadership, were failing this administration in this country, why do we have 23,000 violent felons arrested this year alone? A a double increase from that time last year. Why is it that we have seized 6,000 weapons? Why have we found 1,500 child predators and arrested them? Why have we 300 human traffickers in jail? Why have we found and identified 4,700 children? Why have we seized 1,600 kilograms of fentanyl, enough to kill a third of the American public, a 25% increase alone from last year? 88,000 kilograms of cocaine seized, 7,000 kilograms of meth seized, and that's just on our criminal operations in summer heat. How is it possible that we're taking 8 kilograms off the streets of the cities in New Jersey and preventing the deaths of 607,000 people this year alone, a failure of the FBI and my leadership? How is it that we have counterintelligence arrests already this year exceeding the numbers from the entirety of last year? 33% increase in PRC, 83% in Russia, 60% in the CI space as it relates to Iran, and we haven't even talked about CT, the southern border, the northern border.
Before Senator Cruz, I kind of feel like a broken record today. All this interest in FBI termination, yet my colleague showed no intent or interest in when my whistleblower suffered retaliation over the past years, particularly the past 4 years. Indeed, one whistleblower has alleged that Brian Driscoll's insubordination, whether an agent is on a hot button case or not, they ought to be held accountable for misconduct and weaponization. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I have to say, it used to be that to see theater, you had to go to the Kennedy Center. Now, apparently, you need only go to the Senate Judiciary Committee and see our Senate Democrats berating the director of the FBI, which, okay, it's not, partisan politics is not new in the United States Congress. But what is remarkable is what Senator Booker was berating Director Patel about. He wasn't berating him for failing to do his job, but rather he was furious for Director Patel for successfully doing his job. For 4 years, the Democrats under Joe Biden had an open border that undermined the safety of every single American. They allowed 12 million illegal aliens to come into this country to invade this country, and every single day Americans were murdered, women were raped, children were assaulted by violent criminals that Democrats released. Now, Director Patel, I found Senator Booker's questioning really bizarre. He asked you, have you reassigned FBI agents from human trafficking to immigration issues? Director Patel, are the Mexican cartels that are bringing people illegally into this country engaged in human trafficking?
Yes, sir.
What the hell does it mean to reassign someone from human trafficking to immigration? The greatest human trafficking in the world has been over the last 4 years at our southern border. It is modern day slavery that the Democrats still defend. They still defend those open borders. Mr. Patel, he also said, did you reassign FBI agents from protecting children to immigration? How many children have you found that were victimized by the open borders of the previous administration?
4,700.
4,700. And yet, oddly, I don't hear a Democrat here saying, gosh, thanks for protecting those kids.
35% increase year to date last year.
All right, I want to shift topics. And I want to shift topics to what happened last week. Charlie Kirk was assassinated. He was assassinated because of his political views. We're living in a time of enormous division and tragically hatred, and hatred that manifested in evil that we saw last week. Now, the FBI, working in concert with state and local law enforcement, apprehended what appears to be, in all likelihood, the murderer. And you did so in just 33 hours. So I want to start by just congratulating you and the FBI agents and state and local law enforcement for successfully apprehending the murderer in less than a day and a half. In the wake of that assassination, We have seen far too many people on the left celebrating the assassination. We've seen Democrats, we've seen activists cheering it on. We've seen, tragically, teachers in high schools, teachers in elementary schools, university professors cheering on the murder of Charlie Kirk. You and I both knew Charlie well. He was a good friend. He was an extraordinary man. And I will say there's a great deal of discussion about what to do about it. Under our Constitution, under the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, speech is protected. And that's true even for vile speech. Someone can stand up and say the most hateful thing, and it's protected by the First Amendment. Nazis and Klansmen can march in the streets, and even though their speech is bigoted and horrible and racist, the First Amendment protects it. Conduct, however, is not protected by the First Amendment, particularly conduct that is violent. Violent conduct that is threatening others, that is harassing others, that is injuring, or in this case, murdering others, is most assuredly not protected by the First Amendment. And so I would encourage you and the FBI to focus on conduct. Now, speech can guide you to those engaged in conduct. And I will say one question that I have and many have, and I recognize this is an ongoing investigation, so I don't want you to say anything that would compromise the investigation. But what can you tell us at this point about what evidence there exists of other individuals who may have had prior knowledge of this assassin's plans to murder Charlie Kirk on September 10th?
Generally speaking, we've interviewed numerous people, family members and friends, including the partner, to provide us with a detailed history of the knowledge he may have had, the suspect may have had prior to. We're still mapping out who, if anyone, was involved as an accomplice. As I said, the investigation is ongoing. We're also speaking to and going to interview numerous individuals online who were part of a chat group that was involved in this heinous assassination. And we're also going to work with our state and local partners out in Utah to find out what community organizations, if any, participated or had any foreknowledge of this information. But it's very much ongoing. I remind everybody that it's not even been a week since Charlie's tragic death.
Is it accurate? It's been widely reported that the assassin's roommate was a transgender man who was transitioning to be female, and it's also been reported that they may have been romantic partners. Is that accurate?
Yes, Senator.
And I assume the FBI is investigating. It has also been reported that there were transgender chat rooms that may have had some awareness of the plan to commit this murder. Is that accurate as well?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
It's been reported that there were chat rooms of transgender activists that indicated some degree of potentially of foreknowledge of this murder.
We're still developing that.
Do you have any information, the bullet casings had on them both Antifa and LGBT wording on them? Do you have any indication of the source of those engravings and what inspired them?
As to the actual source, we're still developing that.
I want to encourage you in the course of this investigation, absolutely go after anyone who aided and abetted. But I want to more broadly encourage you, follow the money. The violence we are seeing is not purely organic. There is, I believe, significant money that is spreading dissension, that is spreading violence. Antifa. Do you believe Antifa is a terrorist organization?
I believe Antifa is associated with a lot of violence in this country. As to its designation, I'll leave that to the appropriate authorities.
So I would encourage the administration to designate Antifa as a terrorist organization, to go systematically after Antifa. They've committed acts of violence all over the country. And the shell casings have multiple references to slogans that Antifa has popularized. I believe there is considerable money funding it. I would note that I've introduced legislation called the Stop Funders Act. Stop Funders Act would add rioting to the list of predicate offenses under RICO. I believe the money should be tracked and prosecuted under RICO. And both the Antifa and Black Lives Matter riots of a couple of years ago and the pro-open border riots in Los Angeles and other cities of this past year, I believe there was significant money behind those riots. I'm not the only person who noticed at the anti-Semitic protests and violent protests on college campuses that many of the tents all matched. And so I would ask, would it aid your ability to prosecute these matters if Congress passed into law the Stop Funders Act and if rioting was added to the list of predicate offenses for RICO?
Yes.
Talk to me about the efforts of the FBI to go after the funders of the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses, the pro-open border protests in cities, and potential LGBT violence. Talk to me about the efforts to go after the money of those who are funding and promoting violence.
As I've always said, Senator, money doesn't lie, and we've been following the money. And so that's what we're doing, issuing lawful process to organizations involved with criminal activity, because the money's got to come from somewhere and it has to be funded somehow. So we have extensive investigations ongoing into numerous organizations that are related to violent criminal activity.
Cutting off the money will make America much safer, and that is the core job of the FBI. And I thank you for doing your job.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, glad to be on this committee and take our responsibility seriously to conduct oversight of the FBI, obviously one of the most critical law enforcement agencies in the country. As Senator Klobuchar and others on this committee have reminded us, the last several months have provided far too many reminders of the political violence crisis in America today, and the gun violence crisis in America today, including the tragic killing just last week. Director Patel, this committee takes seriously its not just oversight role, but recognizing the FBI's important role in protecting the public from gun violence while respecting constitutional rights. If you recall, this was a significant subject area of my questioning during your confirmation hearing. The Bureau plays a central role in enforcing federal firearm laws, ensuring the accuracy of background checks, and monitoring trends like machine gun conversion devices and lost or stolen firearms. Now, during your confirmation hearing, you pledged that the FBI would enforce firearm laws fully and fairly, consistent with the Second Amendment. Yet we continue to see a sharp rise in lost and stolen firearms reported by federal licensees. Can you point to any measurable enforcement results like arrests, not just arrests, but also prosecutions or task force expansions since you became director?
I'll get those to you, Senator.
Nothing you can share here today?
No, I'll get the full list to you.
You came unprepared today to respond to questions which you knew were important, going back to your confirmation hearing. Now, the Bureau has warned about the public safety threat posed by machine gun conversion devices, which convert semi-automatic weapons to automatic ones. Can you at least reference what resources you're dedicating to this threat?
Absolutely, Senator. Part of tracking ghost guns, as you alluded to, is having a sustainable database, which is hubbed out of our CJIS division in West Virginia. And we've allocated more resources so that FFLs can track and trace firearms that are stolen and make sure they don't get into the population. That's one of my primary concerns, that we don't want stolen weapons anywhere near anything.
But the numbers continue to go up as reported by federal licensees. Let me get to my next question on this topic. You previously stated that you hadn't reviewed FISA, a federal law that improves reporting to the National Criminal Background Check System. 8 months into your job, what concrete steps have you taken to ensure that NICS records are complete, accurate, and timely?
That's actually a great question that we have dedicated a lot of resources to, again, at CJIS. The NICS system has been trying to get to 100% within 15 minutes. We are currently at 93%, with 87% of those being responsive in less than 60 seconds. So we got more
Do you
work to do.
think additional resources would be helpful in getting to 100%, or do you still argue that less resources are necessary to get from 93 to 100?
No, I just think we have to work on how fast our actual infrastructure processes these things.
On to a question about resources. The FBI's core mission is to counter terrorism, espionage, and major criminal threats. Now, recent large-scale reassignments to immigration enforcement or politically motivated investigations cause me concerns that other critical missions are being neglected. One example, in March of this year, you created a Tesla-related task force and diverted personnel from the Domestic Terrorism Operations Section to work on that task force. What risk analysis justified that decision, and do you still consider domestic violent terrorism to be a lower priority?
Any form of terrorism, domestic or national, is the highest priority at the FBI. And
But
when
why
you say,
divert resources away from those missions?
I don't believe that's accurate. We did not divert resources away. When cars were exploding and people were being set on fire, I directed resources to address it.
Well, then I'll suggest in your follow-up, and we can make this more explicit in our questions for the record, that you provide the accurate information about the diversion of resources. Because, again, when I understand that you authorize large-scale agent reassignments from counterintelligence and cybercrime to not just immigration cases, but others, it has an impact on the other priorities like nation-state threats and ransomware investigations. Moving on to a different subject area. Safeguarding our elections is a core FBI responsibility. The public needs confidence that election security work is driven by facts and free from political influence. Mr. Director, do you agree with Attorney General Bondi's decision to disband the FBI Foreign Influence Task Force?
The disbanding of that task force did not in any way reallocate or take away resources from that critical mission set.
So then how are you mitigating the risk of foreign actors interfering in U.S. elections heading in?
As I've highlighted through our cyber programs, which have seen a 40, 50, 60% increase in arrests for cyber threat actors looking to not just harm our critical infrastructure systems, but also interfere in our elections. We've had multiple arrests this year of individuals who are interfering in that process.
Did the Department of Justice's Election Integrity Task Force seek statewide voter lists and driver's license data?
I can't speak for the Department of Justice.
You're a member of the Department of Justice.
I can
Did
speak
the
for the
FBI play a role in those requests?
Whatever request that we had pursuant to the department's direction were provided
So then you can speak
for the
to
FBI.
those actions.
For the FBI.
So you can speak to those actions.
For the FBI.
So what role did you play in those requests?
Whatever requests we get from the department, I don't have those details in front of me. We provide whatever requests they have.
I have not many details in front of you on a lot of the questions coming from this side of the aisle. So I do hope that there are substantive and accurate responses to our questions in writing. In my time left, Mr. Chairman, I just want to call out a couple of observations. The director before us has tried to explain, I won't say explain, tried to explain how he doesn't need another $500 million to do the job. And specifically that even if the FBI had an additional $500 million, it would take years, I think he referenced 14 years, to fill the vacancies. But in the meantime, relying on partnership with local law enforcement to fulfill the mission of the Bureau. As we've discussed in other hearings and in other committees, by the way, given this immigration mass deportation agenda of the administration, the FBI is not the only one leaning on local law enforcement to do the job. ICE has made it clear that they're doing the same. Other law enforcement agencies within DHS is doing the same. So much so that ICE's recruitment, because they're not only not advocating for cuts, they're actually requesting additional dollars and have issues about policy with them. But if ICE's plan to do the job is not just hiring up significantly. They don't seem to have that as a concern, but the FBI does. Both ICE and the FBI are citing partnerships with local law enforcement, which, look, partnership and engagement is great. But having come from local law enforcement at the outset of my public service career, I also know that capacity and resources at the local level are strained, particularly in times like this. And when ICE is going on a hiring spree, and you have local law enforcement agencies worried about their ability to recruit and retain local law enforcement officers and not losing them to the federal government, then our reliance on those local law enforcement agencies is a perilous strategy to take and could undermine local law enforcement's ability to address crime at the local level, whether it's white-collar crime, organized retail theft, violent crime, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in my final minute, I will also suggest this. Director Patel has referenced earlier in the hearing that one of the most significant value addeds of partnering with local law enforcement is that they are the best intelligent source. Is that correct?
For on the ground.
Yet, when local law enforcement is put in a perilous position of being in a role with this mass deportation agenda, which is consistently overreached, has been found to violate the law and the Constitution, and has undermined public confidence in law enforcement, not just by immigrants, by the way, but especially immigrants. When immigrants are victims of crime and are afraid to come forward because they don't know what law enforcement is going to do with their information or not, when immigrants, legal or undocumented, are witnesses to crime and are afraid to come forward with that information because they don't know what's going to happen with their information or not. That undermines the credibility of law enforcement with the community and undermines the intelligence, Director Patel, that you say are the best source of intelligence when it comes to law enforcement. So it's shaky, it's worrisome, and in my opinion, overall, you are failing to live up to the role and responsibility that you have been confirmed to, and I associate with myself with everything Senator Booker said earlier. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, before we go to Senator Blackburn, without objection, I want to introduce into the record a recently declassified document thanks to Director Patel. The document is a Director Wray FBI analysis of Nellie Orr's false statements to the Congress. Orr never suffered consequences for advancing the phony Trump-Russia narrative and attempting to cover up her involvement in the hoax with false statements. Yet time and again, the American justice system has been weaponized against President Trump and his associates, such as Peter Navarro, with reckless abandon. The DOJ's inaction on Nellie Orr's criminal referral, despite the obvious incriminating evidence provided in the FBI's own analysis, undermines public trust in the rule of law thanks to Director Wray's utter failure. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director Patel, thank you ever so much for being with us today. And I want to thank you for your commitment to fight violent crime in Memphis. And when you first came to meet with me before your hearing here, I gave you the stats on Memphis, Tennessee, and their crime rates. And then you committed then and again at your confirmation to help us. You have been true to your word, and we are very, very grateful. Operation Viper has been such a success. The 500 arrests are important. These are gang members and gang leaders out of Memphis, Tennessee. There are over 100 gangs in Memphis. So the impact of these arrests, the impact of 100 indictments of these gang members. And now we have a U.S. Attorney's Office that will actually prosecute violent crimes and actually take up and prosecute federal gun crimes. This is helping to make Memphis safe again. And yesterday at the White House, to have the president announce the second phase of this with bringing in the Guard, and we've got ATF and DEA and the U.S. Marshals and Homeland Security, and the work that you and General Bondi and the President have done is so appreciated by the people of Memphis, Shelby County, West Tennessee, and I am ever so grateful for the work you've done. You know, one of the things, as we talk about Memphis and what a vibrant and wonderful historic city it is, it's important to realize Memphis is one of the logistics hubs in our country. You have I-40, which goes East Coast to West Coast. You have the Port of Memphis. You have FedEx. You have all 5 Class A railroads that are there, as well as so many companies that are important to Memphis. And I have found it so interesting that some of my colleagues want to complain about agents being taken out of the DC office and actually put to work in the field because they've been needed in the field. And you can look at the stats from Operation Viper and see the difference that they have made. And we so appreciate that. I do want to drill down just a little bit on the issue of cargo theft, which ties into the logistics hub in Memphis. We've got a lot of companies that go through there. IMC is a big logistics company. People in Memphis know what it takes to keep America moving. But what a lot of people may not realize is that many of these criminal gangs have been focused on cargo theft. This is how they pay for their activities. So in addition to the carjackings and the home robberies and the smash and grabs and some of the human and sex trafficking, they've gotten into cargo theft. And cargo theft in Memphis has increased over 5,000%. 5,000%. That's what you saw with a Biden administration who wouldn't drill down on this. So having these agents out in the field, having an interagency approach is something that is going to help us with getting our hands around this cargo theft. So talk for just a minute about what your team has done there and the importance of having that interagency approach.
Absolutely, Senator. So Operation Viper nests under Operation Summer Heat, and in multiple cities and mid-major cities across the country, we have surging resources based on crime. And Memphis, as you know, Senator, had the highest per capita homicide rate in the country, and that was simply unacceptable. And so what we did was what we call Phase 01 of operations at the president's direction. We went into some of these cities quietly to collect the intelligence that was necessary to start these operations, to start seizing these firearms, which we've seized, I think, over 115 firearms off the streets, to start taking narcotics off the streets, and also to infiltrate the gang network, this criminal street gang network that is providing these guns and drugs to the public in these communities, allowing for these shootings. And so what the FBI is good at, what the FBI is great at, is partnering with our local authorities in places like Memphis and Miami, and Chicago, and so many other cities across the country to start the work, because you can't do the work on a dartboard basis. You need ground level intelligence. And that's what we do working with our state and local law enforcement. And the results, I think they said over 100 indictments federally just in this 3-4 month surge. And now we're going to go in there with more resources to finish it.
And we are grateful for that. And I think it's so important for my colleagues, what we have seen in Memphis. You mentioned something very important. Your agents go in and they go in quietly. There was no press conference. There was no fanfare. You went in there to work. And very importantly, you gathered the intel. Who are these gang leaders? Where are they? Figuring out who was doing what, and then setting up the process to apprehend these individuals. And it requires infiltrating those networks and having that data to work from so that you are working in partnership. And as I have talked with elected leaders in Shelby County and Memphis, as we have talked with those in law enforcement, they have been so grateful to have this support and this additional education that comes, because local police are learning from your agents when they are learning how to track these gangs and infiltrate these networks. We know that phase 2 of this operation is going to kick off. The Guard is going to be there to support the Memphis Police Department to help them kind of catch up, because they still have a lot of people on their board. They know who they are, where they are, what they're doing. They want to apprehend them and bring them forward. So talk a little bit about how phase 2 is going to continue to work to support the law enforcement efforts in Memphis.
Well, it's just like what happened here in Washington, D.C. It takes a whole of government interagency approach where we're working with the Attorney General, the DEA, the ATF, the U.S. Marshals, Department of Homeland Security, because each one of those agencies has specialized capabilities. And when we surge together to work off of the ground level intelligence was collected, you see what happened in Washington, D.C. here. And that's the next phase of it, because you are able to utilize the National Guard to set up border perimeter operations. So when you go into an area, you have the secure workspace to get in there and stay in there. The key here, Senator, is sustained criminal investigations and sustained prosecutions that clear Memphis, like we did Washington, permanently, and leave behind a blueprint for what local law enforcement can do with our federal partners to sustain that. We don't want to go backwards, and that's critical, but we're in the next step. Sustaining it will be the last one.
Well, and we certainly appreciate that. I do want to touch on Operation Restore Justice. And Senator Britt mentioned some of this very briefly, and I know that you and A.G. Bondi have done a tremendous amount of work in protecting children. I appreciate that. And we passed my Report Act last year, and President Biden signed it. And this does require social media to report to NCMEC so that we can have these perpetrators followed up with and apprehended. That's a good start. We're still trying to get the Kids Online Safety Act passed. That has been a bipartisan effort. We have looked with disdain at what has happened with Discord and Charlie Kirk's alleged killer. Talk for a moment about what else Congress ought to do in order to give you all the toolbox you need to apprehend these predators and pedophiles.
Well, I think we need to go after the monetary backbone of this infrastructure, like we discussed earlier. I think we also need to make parents across the country aware of how invasive some of these social media sites are and how much criminal enterprise is going on and how easily these kids can be sucked into it. And also, the only way, in my opinion, to do that, as Senator Klobuchar and I believe Senator Graham had stated, was, we need to work on Section 230. It's been too long since we've addressed it. Nobody's being held accountable. They're making money, and our youth is dying. And
Yes.
that's just unacceptable.
Well, we have that reform bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Welch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And just at the outset, I just want to say what I think all of us believe, and that is that the political violence that is so afflicting our country, it doesn't matter whether it's from the right or the left. I mean, all of us have an obligation to fiercely advocate for our point of view. All of us have an obligation to respect people with whom we disagree. The folks we disagree with are our opponents, but they're not our enemies. And I hope all of us keep that in mind and do the best we can to set that example. I want to congratulate the FBI. I want to congratulate the Utah state and local law enforcement for the very good work that it did in apprehending the violent assailant of Charlie Kirk, and that is a terrible, terrible tragedy. Director Patel, at one point you made an announcement that the suspect was in custody. We got our man. It turned out that was not true. In fact, I think that was about 27 hours before the person now in custody was apprehended. Why did you make that statement?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you letting me address this. What the FBI does is not just locate and find suspects, but we also participate in eliminating subjects. And what we had at the time was a subject in custody in relation to this investigation. So in my commitment to work with the public to help identify subjects and suspects, I put that information out. And then when we interviewed him, I put out the results of that. And could I have been more careful in my verbiage and included an A subject instead of subject? Sure, in the heat of the moment, but I was doing the best I could.
In all candor, I don't quite get that, because if we have our man, that would suggest to the public that everybody can.
Senator, we did dig in, and we are doing our investigation simultaneously with Congress. And just to put it in perspective, we provided 700 documents on the Richmond Catholic Memo specifically to this committee, whereas my predecessor provided 19 pages. And not only that, but we looked into how the source recruitment structure at the FBI was conducted during this time. And we made adjustments and permanent fixes to ensure that sources are not put into houses of worship unless there is an actual ongoing criminal or international terrorism threat. We will not use sources at this FBI to investigate and cull information just for the sake of culling information in houses of worship.
Has anybody been fired for this?
There have been terminations related to this and resignations.
Good. There need to be, because if this is going to be standard at the FBI, nobody can trust the FBI. You want to talk about violating the First Amendment? This has got First Amendment violation written all over it. It's one of the most revolting chapters in the FBI's history. And considering what we're seeing more broadly in terms of the acts of violence against people of faith, this has absolutely got to end, and the FBI has to lead the way. So I count on you to do that, Director. Let me just, in the minute or so that I have remaining, let me just shift gears and ask you about something else you said earlier. You said that protecting our youth is maybe the FBI's top priority. It's great to hear. Let me ask you about the role of AI chatbots in that, which you've talked about a little bit already today. Are you investigating any cases of AI-generated child sex abuse material? You issued a PSA earlier this year warning that synthetic child sex abuse material, it's where the AI generates it using maybe a real kid's image, but then generates sex material, sex abuse material. You warned that that was illegal under federal law. Is the FBI investigating any instances of this synthetic CSAM material generated by AI that you could speak to?
We are investigating dozens of those matters because, let me just say this, as far as the FBI is concerned, generative AI that produces CSAM, child sexual abuse material, under our investigative authorities is treated as equally as if it were actual child sexual abuse material. There's no difference for me in the FBI on this.
Let me just ask you one other thing in this vein. I'm sure you've seen the reporting that Meta's AI rules, their own internal guidelines, allowed their chatbots to have sensual, that's their word, sensual conversations with children. We've had instances, multiple instances of children, minors, taking their own lives at the behest of chatbots that instructed them with specificity on how to do it. What's the FBI's role here in investigating what is going on with these chatbots, with these AI companies encouraging? I mean, listen, if an actual person did that, we would say that's grooming. We would say that's child abuse. These companies are doing it. Their own guidelines allow it. What can we do about that?
You're referring to NVE, nihilistic violent extremism, and the 764. It has been made a priority of the FBI because they are targeting children, and these chatbots and these generative AI are getting coupled with actual humans who are using them and releasing them because they can do the work faster and quicker than humans can and get into spaces like social media where humans have a difficulty in engaging. And what we're doing is treating any extension of generative AI as the criminal themselves. And we have, I think, I've got to get the number back to you, but over 1,000 investigations related to NVE. We've had numerous takedowns and arrests of 764 individuals, and we are educating. This may be the most important part. I'm directly engaging with the social media and media companies, the internet service providers, to find a way to shut down. There's nothing I can do at the FBI to force them to shut it down, but work with you in Congress to find a way to work with our partners to get that shut down permanently.
Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley. Thank you, Chairman, for calling this hearing. I'm grateful we're continuing this committee's long tradition of oversight, and in particularly today, oversight of the FBI. Director Patel, thank you for being here. There's a number of issues I hope that we can speak to. I want to start by reading something you said to me during your confirmation hearing under oath. I have no interest, no desire, and will not, if confirmed, go backwards. There will be no politicization at the FBI. Then you looked me in the eyes and said there will be no retribution actions taken by the FBI should I be confirmed as director. I told you that in your office. I tell you that again today. I'm concerned that that's not what's happened, that since you took over as director, you've cleaned house or forced out senior leaders across the Bureau, in particular targeting those that worked on investigations of President Trump. The former acting director has just sued you for firing him for political reasons. So did a leader in the D.C. field office. And the well-respected leader of the Salt Lake City office was pushed out last month, leaving that office shorthanded at a particularly difficult time. I'm worried that these actions compromise the Bureau's ability to keep Americans safe. Hundreds of agents have resigned. You are lowering application standards to fill vacancies. You've reassigned large numbers of agents to work on immigration and street crime, issues other law enforcement agencies can handle, perhaps more effectively with the FBI. But I'm concerned that this compromises the Bureau's ability to address national security risks, uniquely its capability. In fact, you've shut down the Office of Integrity and Compliance, which makes sure that agents act in a lawful and ethical way, and reassign staff away from domestic terrorism investigations exactly at a moment I think we are all concerned about it. I also have to ask, you came before the Appropriations Committee in May and told us you wanted a $500 million budget cut for the FBI, literally an effort to defund the police. I am grateful for the work of the men and women of the FBI. They've done great work this year in Delaware, partnering with the Dover Police Department to support human trafficking victims, partnering with the Middletown Police Department on armed robbery and carjacking. And it's urgent, I think, that we fix the direction and the prioritization within the FBI. And I wish we could focus on those efforts today. But I'm seeing an FBI leadership more focused on social media clout and on political revenge than on fighting crime. Director, have you ever ordered that an FBI employee be terminated because he or she worked on an investigation into President Trump?
Senator, thank you. One quick correction for the record. There's 280 NV investigations. I gave the incorrect number to Senator Hawley. Thank you.
Understood.
As far as a lot of your statement, I disagree with it, and I'm happy to address it. But the only way, generally speaking, an individual is terminated at the FBI is if they have violated their oath of office, violated the law, or failed to uphold the standards that we need them to have at the FBI.
So those who say that they've been fired because of working on investigations into President Trump are lying or misrepresenting?
Well, those matters are alleged in litigation, which is ongoing, so I can't comment on those specifically.
Could you comment on why you fired former acting FBI Director Driscoll?
I can't because it's ongoing litigation.
Could you say now definitively under oath that the rank and file agents who were assigned to work January 6 cases will not be terminated because that's what they were assigned to do?
I've said it before and I've said it again. Your case assignment, as I was given case assignments when I was a young prosecutor, does not dictate your career or your termination.
Thank you. Then let me go to the appropriations question. In May, you testified before the subcommittee on which I serve, defending the president's request that we slash the FBI's budget by about $500 million. The day before, you testified the opposite in front of the House. Where are we in terms of the budget request? Senator Graham earlier said if you're requesting more funding for more agents, let us know. We're nearing the end of the fiscal year. In front of the committee on which I serve here in the Senate, your request was for a reduction of hundreds of millions of dollars. Where are we?
Where we are in the budget cycle is we at the FBI are in support of the president's budget, and we are in support of eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. We've already identified tens of millions of dollars of duplicative contracts that the FBI was spending on software and private sector engagements. We've also identified duplicative workloads. So we are transitioning those folks out of doing the same thing twice over and into the field. And that's my focus right now. And the move of the FBI headquarters is also going to save the FBI $3.5 billion in the American taxpayers. So we're focused on eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. And as I told Senator Graham, if I'll go back and talk to my team, and if we need more, we'll let you know.
Are you planning any additional reductions in force, Director?
No.
How many vacancies are you currently trying to fill within the agency?
In terms of the 1811 ranks, there's a few hundred open vacancies that we have funded. And so we're filling all of those with our hybrid 1811 program and our new recruitment program, and I think a lesser amount of IAs and SOS.
So if hundreds of agents have retired or taken the fork in the road offer, and you have vacancies, but you're requesting $500 million less, how does having fewer FBI agents help you tackle violent crime and address our national security issues?
Just to put it in perspective,
cybersecurity
Senator,
issues?
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. If we had this $500 million, we've done the math. It would take us 14 years to onboard every vacancy that's on the books currently at the FBI, because we can't hire these folks and train them overnight. It's a years-long process. So we are currently focused on recruiting the best and filling the positions to the best of our needs. And we, even if we had this extra money, wouldn't be able to hire them overnight. We're looking for where the need is greatest, where in the country we need to send them, and how we can change the training requirements, which is why I'm thrilled to have police officers. They might not have a college degree, but they got the street smarts and the cop smarts to become FBI agents, and that's what we want.
Let me turn to Section 702.
Yes, sir.
When you testified in front of the CJS subcommittee, we talked about this issue. You told me you were in favor of reauthorizing FISA Section 702 when it expires next year,
Right.
so long as the reforms implemented last year, reforms like better training for agents and real consequences for inappropriate searches of Americans' communications, were maintained. You also said that you had some ideas about how to make Section 702 better going forward. Can you give me an update on the FBI's implementation of these reforms and the direction you think it should go?
Absolutely. I think you're referring to the query process, and if you're not, let me know. But any instance of abuse or mistakes that were made in the query process have now been changed. It used to be you can make multiple mistakes and continue to access the query database system. I've changed that. If you make a mistake, you're immediately sidelined, a review is conducted. And if it was an actual mistake, i.e., there should have been S on the end of that name and there wasn't, then we put you back in. But we have to review those matters. So that's happening. And if there was an intentional mistake, you have no more access to the 702 query system and its database. So we've also done an audit of the entire 702 system and the query databases. And now we are nearly 100% of the audit. And I think we found one or two, I'll have to get back to you, quote unquote mistakes within that system, which are currently being reviewed.
Thank you. You had told me in May that you'd send me updated statistics about the Section 702 searches of Americans' data. I haven't received it. When will I get that?
I'll work with my team to get that to you, Senator.
And frankly, in May, when you were testifying that you were implementing these reforms, you were also closing down the Office of Internal Auditing at the FBI. Now, that was the office created in the first Trump administration to improve the Bureau's compliance with Section 702. How is that working out? How can you continue to advocate for robust civil liberty protections, but shut down the office that was created to enforce those safeguards? Help me understand this.
Absolutely, Senator. This is a great example of sort of duplicative work. There was two divisions in the FBI working on this, And all we did was the inspection division, which is the leader in this query system and this audit system, has now been given the single source mandate to conduct these. So the OIA, its elimination is just taking folks who were working there and were experts in it and folded in under the inspection division, and then taking other folks that we didn't need because we had enough manpower and pushing them elsewhere in the FBI.
I'm concerned about the rise in threats against members of our judiciary. What are you
Yes, sir.
doing with the U.S. Marshal Service to help protect our federal judges and with state and local judicial systems to help provide some of the expertise of the FBI in protecting them as well?
I share your concern, Senator. We have 35 open investigations, 17 against federal judges, and the remainder against state court judges and threats that they have received. And as you know, federally, there's a specific statute which prohibits that. So we are working up those cases and referring them to prosecution where we can meet the threshold for evidence.
In your written testimony, you referenced how counter-UAS legislation expires and we need to resolve the conflict in jurisdiction and authority. I agree, this is an urgent concern. I have heard from state and local law enforcement about it, from the folks responsible for major events, whether it's sports or concerts or public events. Given the tragic increase in political violence, I'm very concerned about the misuse of drones and the potential of there being a catastrophic event. What could we do to address this challenge?
Well, obviously, reauthorizing the capabilities that we have under the Counter-UAS program. But just to highlight what the FBI is specifically doing, we've been given the mandate to work with DHS to secure not just the Club World Cup that we had, by the way, which occurred in 32 matches across the country without any significant incident, which we're proud of, and we're taking that model for the next World Cup and also the Olympics. But the reason I bring that up is because we pushed out our counter-UAS programs to address the security needs, and that's where our focus is on events like that.
Mr. Director, thank you for your testimony. I look forward to working on actually solving criminal problems and reducing the extent to which what we're going back and forth about is more political and partisan point scoring and more actually solving crimes for the American people.
Yes, sir.
Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Director, you and the FBI working with state and local law enforcement officials in Utah have caught the assassin of Mr. Charlie Kirk. Is that right?
We have a suspect, yes, sir.
And you did that within 48 hours, did you not?
33 hours.
33 hours. Congratulations. We've had other political assassinations. Back in June, an assassinated Representative Melissa Hoffman, Mr. Hoffman, Senator John Hoffman, and Mrs. Hoffman in Minnesota. You and the FBI and Minnesota state and local law enforcement officials caught the assassin within 48 hours, did you not?
I believe that timeline's correct, Senator.
Congratulations. Sometimes we miss the forest for the trees. Good work. Did Mr. Kirk's assassin act alone?
As I've said since the beginning, Senator, it is very much an ongoing investigation, and I can't speak to the state charges. That's for the state to address on their own, but we are providing them with the same investigatory findings reporting the department. And as I noted to Senator, I believe it was Cornyn or Hawley, that there are a number of individuals that are currently being investigated and interrogated, and a number yet to be investigated and interrogated specific to that chat room. So we are very much in our ongoing posture of investigation.
So others could have been involved?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I asked you this last time you were here. Kash, you remember Mr. Peter Strzok and Ms. Lisa Page?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Strzok was an FBI agent. Ms. Page was an FBI lawyer. They were both very aggressive anti-Trump political activists. who allowed their political opinions to affect their work at the FBI. Is that a fair statement?
I believe their text messages and their testimony that was secured by the OIG and DOJ speak for themselves.
In fact, Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page were having an extramarital affair, and at one point, Ms. Page texted Mr. Strzok, quote, "Trump's not ever going to be president, right? Right?" And Mr. Strzok replied, "No, no, he won't. We will stop it," end quote. Ms. Page resigned from the FBI. Mr. Strzok was fired. They promptly sued the federal government and the FBI and Justice Department for releasing their emails, which revealed all of this. The FBI settled that lawsuit for $1.2 million, gave Mr. Strzok $1.2 million cash, gave Ms. Page, who resigned. She wasn't fired, she resigned, she quit. Gave her $800,000. Who at the FBI made that decision to give them money?
That settlement was reached in the Biden administration when my predecessor was the director.
Who? Are you saying that Chris Wray did?
The only people that can decide that settlement are the Attorney General in conjunction with the director and the administration.
Okay, so you're telling me that Attorney General Garland and Director Wray decided to give them the money? Is
Yes,
that
sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when you took over the FBI, did you find instances of where, under the Biden administration, the FBI had weaponized the agency to push the political beliefs of President Biden?
Sorry, the last part.
When you took over the FBI, did you find instances of where the Biden administration had politicized the FBI to prosecute its political agenda?
Well, I won't speak for other people. Haven't been a target of that weaponization, haven't been a staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, having had the Justice Department weaponized against me for making the findings and leading the investigation of Russiagate. I know what that feels like, and that's why as the FBI director, I'm committing to not ever have that ever happen again, but I'm also committed to fully investigating what was done, and that matter is still ongoing.
So I assume, I take it your answer is yes.
Yes, sir.
And you're firing those people, is that right?
Anyone that politicizes their job at the FBI will not work at the FBI.
Okay. You've heard some of my colleagues either implicitly or otherwise suggest that you have politicized the FBI to prosecute the political beliefs of President Trump. Is that true?
I don't know how that can be true when the stats that I cited, to include the 23,000 arrests, 6,000 weapons seized, 1,600 gang and criminal enterprise organizations, 4,700 children found and rescued, more enough fentanyl seized to kill a third of America. The men and women of the FBI are now on an apolitical mission, and this is why the numbers are historic in 7
Have you
months.
fired people because they voted for Vice President Harris?
I don't ask people who they vote for, and neither does the FBI.
Okay. But you've given people polygraphs, have you not?
Many people in the FBI take polys.
The FBI does that all the time.
Yes, sir.
Does it not?
Yes,
For a
sir.
long time, is that correct?
Decades.
All right. I want to ask you about the Epstein files. Have you seen the Epstein files?
I have not reviewed the entirety of it myself, but a good amount.
Would it be fair to say that Mr. Epstein trafficked young women, including, in some instances, minors, for sex to himself?
That was specifically the allegations in the 2018 indictment in the Southern District of New York.
Okay. Who else did he traffic these young women to?
In terms of what the investigation, again, going back to 2008, Mr. Acosta, who limited the investigation and limited the search warrants and limited the parameters of the investigation, The only thing we are able to speak to publicly, because he was given a non-prosecution agreement by Mr. Acosta, is that first time period from, I believe, don't quote me on this, 97 to 2001-ish. And then when the Trump administration courageously reopened it.
Ash, excuse me for interrupting, but I'm going to run out of time. You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these young women to besides himself?
Himself, there is no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And the information we have, again, is limited.
So the answer is no one
For the information that we have
in the files?
in the case file.
Okay. Now, President Trump has deferred to the FBI and the Department of Justice with respect to the Epstein records. He says it is your call about releasing them. And I understand that the department and the agency have decided to release them in cooperation with the House committee. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So you're releasing them a little bit at a time. Is that correct?
We're releasing as much as we can, but we are limited by 3 different court orders, and the department went back to each of those judges to waive those court orders or have them lifted, and each of those judges declined.
Will you release all of them, or at least as many as you can?
We will release everything we are legally permitted to do so. We are continuing to work with the House on the subpoena request. We have substantially complied with it, but we will continue to release whatever we are legally permitted to do so.
Okay. I strongly encourage you to do that. Kash, this issue's not going to go away. And I think the essential question for the American people is this. They know that Epstein trafficked young women for sex to himself. They want to know who, if anyone else, he trafficked these young women to. And that's a very fair question. I want to know that answer. And I think you're going to have to do more to satisfy the American people's understandable curiosity in that regard.
Mr. Chairman, may I just respond to that? I agree, Senator. And what we have done, and just to remind folks, the Epstein case files existed in the 2 prior administrations, in the Obama administration and the Biden administration, and they didn't release anything. And there was President Trump in the first administration that renewed charges against Mr. Epstein. And I know it's a little complicated to understand, but what exists in the Epstein case files was a direct result of the limited search warrants from 2006 and 7, which hamstrung future investigations because of the non-prosecution agreement. And multiple administrations had the opportunity to look at the entirety of that case file and recommend prosecutions against anyone that was trafficked under Mr. Epstein and anyone that participated in that trafficking. And the only person to bring charges was the prior administration against Mr. Epstein. Now, I am not saying that others were not trafficked and others were not involved. What I am telling you is that based on the information we have, and we have continuously and publicly asked for the public to come forward with more information. If there is, we'll look at it. But based on credible information, we have released all credible information, and the information that the Department of Justice and the FBI never releases is information on investigations that are not credible. And we don't release the names of victims who weren't credible, but in the same time, we don't release the names of victims who were credible. And so that's by law. And so the information we are releasing now is historic, and it is also to the maximum capacity that the law allows. And I know that's not going to satisfy many, many, many people, but if they wanted it done right, then the investigation from its origination should have been done right, and he should not have been given a get-out-of-jail-free card to do jail on the weekends for 12 hours a day, and he should have been investigated fully for the entirety of his crime and criminal enterprise, not just from 1997 to 2001.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, thank you for being here today. You'll recall well in January at your confirmation hearing before this committee, I raised the prospect of politically motivated retaliation, and you promised me, as you did other members of this committee, quote, "Every FBI employee will be held to the absolute same standard and no one will be terminated for case assignments." You went on to tell me, quote, "All FBI employees will be protected against political retribution." And you assured one of my colleagues that you would honor the internal review process of the FBI. I'm not going to mince words. You lied to us. In the short time that you've been FBI director, you've presided over a rash of retaliatory firings. 3 FBI agents have recently sued you. They are FBI agents with 60 years between them of distinguished service, rescuing hostages, saving kids from predators, dismantling drug cartels, and their allegations, their civil allegations, are a searing indictment of your tenure as FBI director. But it's not just those 3. The FBI Agents Association has said that your actions, quote, "distract agents from their work, foster fear that their assignments could cost them their careers, either now or under the next administration, and increase the risk of criminal and national security threats by undermining unity and morale within the Bureau," end quote. This association, as you know, is voluntary. It represents 14,000 members, 90% of all the active agents. These are your employees saying that your performance has been unqualified and unfit. And there is mounting evidence that these retaliatory firings were the result of direction from the White House. There have been instances in the past history of the Bureau of political interference and political direction from the director's office, but not the kind of institutional interference that we're seeing from the White House right now. I'm going to ask you, has anyone from the White House contacted you about personnel decisions?
I completely disagree with your entire premise that I have lied or am misleading the FBI. If I were, the results that I announced today by the men and women of the FBI and the historic records we are doing to keep this country safe would not be possible. The men and women of the FBI are responding to our leadership and this administration's priorities. The only way people get terminated at the FBI is if they fail to meet the muster of the job and their duties, and that is where I will leave it. And you accusing me of lying is something I don't take lightly, but I'm not going to get into a tit for tat with you.
Well, let me just ask you to answer my question. Has anyone from the White House contacted you about personnel decisions?
Generally speaking, we always discuss with the White House, OMB, during the budget process, how many personnel we need, who we need where.
Answer is yes.
For budgetary purposes and
you've been directed to fire people, agents, because they participated in investigations of the president?
I don't receive directions to do that.
Has anyone
I make the
suggested it?
decisions.
Has anyone asked you to do it? The best information is, yes, you've taken suggestions and direction from the White House in firing qualified agents.
Any termination at the FBI was a decision that I made based on the evidence that I have as a director of the FBI, and it's my job, and I'm not going to shy away from it. And as you stated, those are allegations, and that is an ongoing litigation. So they'll have their day in court, so will we.
The allegations are not just in that lawsuit, Director Patel, and I think your testimony confirms that, in fact, you've taken direction from the White House in those retaliatory firings.
It literally does
not. Because you've acknowledged that, in fact, they have been in contact with you about personnel decisions.
The White House has been, do not put words in my mouth, we're on the record. The White House, like any administration, contacts its agencies on the budgeting process and where it needs personnel and where the mission priorities are. That always happens. If they didn't do that, they would be abdicating their responsibility to law enforcement. I will always work with my partners in the chain of command at the Department of Justice and the White House to ensure that this FBI is delivering the results we are delivering, to include the lowest murder rate in modern U.S. history, to include the most fentanyl seizures in modern U.S. history, to include the most lives saved and the most children found in
Just
modern
ask
U.S.
you,
history. That is a working FBI. That is not a failing FBI.
Let's move on to a related area. In White House discussions, have you been asked or directed by the White House or others to engage in a crackdown on political groups or organizations, nonprofits, after the murder of Charlie Kirk?
To direct at political organizations? No. I've been asked by my chain of command to properly root out criminal activity wherever it is in whatever investigation we are conducting, and that's what we're doing.
Have those distinctions about whom you're going to target been based on direction from the White House?
Nobody gives me a list on who to target. My targeting list is from the men and women at the FBI.
Have you talked about investigating certain groups, nonprofits, or foundations or institutions?
Whatever those investigations are, they're ongoing, and I'm not going to get into those.
Have you used polygraphs to determine loyalty of agents?
No.
Have you committed that you will respect the First Amendment rights of agents?
I have wildly committed to respecting the First Amendment rights of agents, but at the FBI, you have to balance your First Amendment rights with your mission.
Have you imposed any sort of loyalty test in the course of using polygraphs or in any of the other personnel decisions?
Polygraphs have been utilized at the FBI for decades. They will continue to be utilized in the fashion by the professionals that administer them.
Have you asked under the polygraph test about individuals' loyalty or about their voting records or any kind of past statements?
Just to make it abundantly clear, I don't tell the professionals how to conduct polygraphs or what questions to ask. They make those decisions. And I, as the director of the FBI, never ask anyone who they voted for.
Have you investigated donors to a political party simply because they are donors?
Simply based on that fact alone, no.
Have you investigated donors for another reason?
Many donors may be involved in criminal enterprises and criminal activities, and those individuals will be investigated.
Can you commit to make public the Epstein files that so far have not been released if this committee is able to review them on a classified basis?
I think this is an important distinction. The Epstein case file is not classified to my understanding. So we are providing what we legally can, and we are going to give Congress what we are legally permitted to do so to the maximum extent of the law.
Will you enable the chairman and the ranking member to review them on a classified basis?
That doesn't make any sense. If the material in the Epstein file is not classified, there is no basis for a
Well, it
classified
would
review.
protect the confidentiality of them if they were able to review them on a classified basis.
If anyone in this room can get the multiple district court judges to lift their court protective orders in the ceilings, we will happily provide you with more information.
Are you in favor of merging the DEA and the ATF?
That's not something for me to comment on.
Well, those agencies work with you, don't they?
With me, not for me.
Are you in favor of orienting the FBI toward a national police function as opposed to the enforcement of federal law?
The FBI does enforce federal law across the country. That's what we do.
But isn't it a fact that you have told the leadership of the FBI that you view it as moving toward a local and state police function?
No, we are prioritizing working with our local and state partners, and they will tell you that That has never happened with this much engagement in the history that they have been serving as local law enforcement officers. I believe local cops are the best intelligence source and the best understanding of their communities, and I folded in my FBI agents under that direction to work with them to get the job done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For the fourth time today, I want to remind people that my oversight has made clear that Director Ray's FBI was politicized. I've released a trove of records to prove it, not only today, but in past days. I've also said some FBI personnel who have been fired retaliated against my whistleblowers. And I don't remember my Democratic colleagues defending my whistleblowers when their careers were ruined. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get into the thrust of my comments and questions, Director, I want to thank you in our meetings prior to your confirmation, during your confirmation. We talked about your desire to get more agents out into the field, out of Washington, and take on violent crime. And you fulfilled that. St. Louis received the largest permanent per capita infusion of FBI agents anywhere in the country. And I know it's not only an isolated event, but we certainly appreciate your honoring your commitment to do that. And I know there's a lot of great opportunities ahead to take on violent crime, which you've highlighted many of the successes in your introductory comments. It's obviously no secret that this hearing takes place in the wake of a horrific American tragedy, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. For those of us who knew him, I know you did too. It's still sort of difficult to put into words what a tragic loss that is, not just for his family, but for our country, for free speech, for a belief that we can have a free exchange of ideas. And he was quite literally shot in the throat in an attempt to silence him and take his life. And so you have this task now of this investigation. There's been an arrest. But I think that we face an even larger crisis that law enforcement alone can't tackle alone. It's a crisis that has culminated in the assassination of Charlie. But it doesn't end there. It's I think every bit present right now, and the challenge is greater than quite frankly, I would have imagined. Seeing some of the comments that have taken place after the assassination, and something that I think as a country we have to reckon with. And it's something deeper, much deeper than a rejection of law and order or the norms of civil society. We've entered a very dangerous time, I think, in our country. And that should be clear to everyone. Political violence is a sign of a deep and corrosive sickness in any society. But in America today, the problem is just not political violence in the abstract. It is the specific kind of political violence which is overwhelmingly driven by a specific set of actors and groups. None of this emerged out of thin air. Over the past week, leaders from across the political spectrum have come out and forcefully condemned Charlie's murder and political violence more broadly. For that, we're all very grateful. We should be grateful. There have been calls to unite and come together in the wake of Charlie's murder, and I